Hi everyone, this is lecture 7 of professional practice, and today we're looking at human resources and job burnout. This is one of my favorite lectures on this module. Aside from the theory that we've covered and we've looked at what motivates you personally and what might motivate you as an educator or in your education role, here we look at how jobs are designed. What do they think of when they make a particular role, and what sustains someone to stay in the work profession? So I told you very early on in the module that you spend most of your life being employed. So how do you avoid getting job burnt out or getting work stress or boredom really in the workplace? So this lecture is going to show you a little bit of what you need to think of behind the scenes, and hopefully it will also inspire you to think of some professional examples that you can use for your group presentation. While listening, the joy of being able to hear me on audio and watch this video is that you can pause the lecture, and I want you to be taking notes while you are listening to this lecture. Write down some of the key points that really speak to you or things that you want to reflect on later on, because it's a lot to take in one go. So be sure to pause the lecture and go back to listen to things again. And at the end of it, to make up for the fact that we're not seeing you in seminars today, I've designed some multiple choice questions and some short responses and some activities really on Moodle. So at the end of the lecture, I want you to answer the questions that I ask as I go along by pausing, and make sure and put those contributions on the Moodle page so I can hear some of your thoughts on what you think about this particular lecture and what you think about some of the discussions that or the points that I raised to be discussed. So what are we going to be looking at? Job burnout and work engagement. What exactly is job burnout, and how does this relate to work engagement? Why is it important? What is the HR department and their functions? Every single industry or sector has something of an HR department. And when you are employed, a lot of your employment and your assignment of your role has to do with HR vetting you. And when you have issues, you go to HR. But what exactly do they do? What are their behind the scenes? What's their responsibility for you in the workplace? What are the incentives? Why do you work? What do you go after when you work? What is the role of compensation? How do you get paid? These are good questions to think about. Is money your only form of payment? Are there any other forms of compensation that you can get if money weren't there? What causes disengagement in the workplace? Why do you get disenfranchised with your particular role? And this ties into questions of why do teachers leave the profession after 5 years? Why do people, after having done something for 10 years, decide that they don't want to do it anymore, or 2 months and they don't want to do it anymore? What causes that disengagement in the workplace? So these are important questions to have answered, or to at least have thought about, because in some way, shape, or form in the future, you may be faced as a young professional considering if you are happy in the particular role that you are in, and what can you do in your particular job to sustain your interest. So what does burnout feel like? Can you rank it in order? Does it feel like you're tired, frustrated, failure? Are you overwhelmed? Are you sad? So when we say burnout, each of us is going to think of something a little bit different. Burnout. What does that mean to you? What does that feel like? At some point you may have been doing a task, if not in the workplace, maybe for uni, maybe at school, maybe at home, you would have been doing and trying to solve a particular problem or do a particular task where you get to the point where you're starting to feel a bit of burnout. What does that feel like? Take a moment and write that down. So there are many different ways that we talk about burnout. Burnout is a metaphor to describe mental exhaustion. When people speak of burnout, you don't get the feeling that they're talking about physical exhaustion. You're getting more of that feeling that they are mentally unable to sustain the drive. But burnout is also described as being tired, being disappointed, not being happy with your particular role or the consequences that you have to deal with in a particular job place. So burnout can also be being able to expect or predict what is going to come next. And you may be a little bit tired of thinking of that rigmarole of action. So where did the term come from? In the 1960s or the 70s, there were many social and cultural changes in society, and there was a lot of changes to welfare institutions, and professions were being set up. And I believe this has a lot to do with industrialization as well. And people felt burnout from having to have a job and have a repetitive task and work consistently on it. We did not really have a really good established balance of what would be a work-life balance, as we call it now. And we always tell people it's important to have a healthy work-life balance. But who determined what work-life balance ought to look like? How did we know that people should work 8-hour days or 7-hour days? How did you know how much time should be spent with work versus how much time should be spent on relaxation or doing other things? Where did we get that good balance from? And it was having gone through, if you look at the history of how the term burnout came to be, it was because people were working all the time. When there was a job to be done, they would continuously do it, but it did affect people in different ways. So they needed to establish what was a healthier balance. And then I get to this question: what makes you bored at work? Is it that you do the same task over and over? Can you feel a lack of progression? Are things going too slow? Is there no exciting challenge? Like nothing really makes you get creative or get those creative juices flowing? Or is it none of these, but it's something else? So this is one of the questions you can reflect on in that Moodle action activities that I've put up. So make sure and take a moment and think about this. What makes you bored at work? Or what do you think might potentially make you bored at work? So boredom is actually a bit different to that of burnout. Burnout is tied to the task, whereas boredom is how you feel about the situation. You feel unchallenged, a low arousal, you're dissatisfied. Boredom is just this lack of wanting to do anything at all. You can't bring yourself to action. And job satisfaction is really important for obvious reasons, but for the individual, job satisfaction matters. It matters that you have certain things that come together, like your salary, the value of your job, your title, the conditions in which you work. All of these little things need to come together, but also the task. So job satisfaction is not just the job that you do, but it is all of the environmental factors that go with it. And part of that environmental factor is also the burnout, resisting burnout, where you have a good work-life balance. That is part of your job satisfaction as well. Okay? So we come to this term work engagement, and there's a lot of social psychology research that goes into work engagement, because it came to be the word to counteract both burnout and boredom, which seems to be two of the main, I would say, headers of characteristics that make people become dissatisfied with their profession or their career. So work engagement is considered a mental state of energy, and work engagement is one way to respond, or studies that respond to how we can resist boredom and burnout. So this is where HR comes into being. So it was first used in business settings so that a particular company can have its organization, its mental capital in check. And you can make sure that people felt a sense of what they were working for was well balanced, and work engagement gave them that mental sense of accomplishment and fueled their energy. But at the same time, the tasks in the workplace did not disenchant people from wanting to be there. So, have you ever been engaged at work? Has there ever been a task or a job to do where you work where you were completely absorbed in it? Can you think of what that feeling felt like? Was it excitement? Was it exhilaration? And more importantly, what was the task that you had to do? So I'm kind of secretly hoping that some of you are feeling a bit of an engagement with your group activities. Oh, I've never done this before. I've never worked with these people before. I'm a bit excited about being able to bring something to the table. Maybe it could be something like that. Maybe it could be the newness of it. Maybe it could also be the familiarity of knowing what to do. And suddenly you can start seeing those self-determination theory fundamentals unpacking itself with the feeling of relatedness, competence, and belonging. Those basic psychological needs are somewhere at the root of what it might be that kept you engaged in the workplace. So take a moment and pause at this point and think about what was it that ever had you engaged in the workplace in a particular task that you were doing. So we get to human resource department. What does it do? Why is it there? What really is HR? When you think of it, and a long, long time ago in my first job, I didn't quite understand, this is when I was 18, what HR, what they did really. I thought they were the people who organized your pay, or they were an admin department. Or later on, I thought about them monitoring the workplace, but they just seemed to be working silently in the background. But when you think of HR, do you think of one of these three roles, or do you think of them as something else? And this might be a point that you can reflect on in the Moodle discussion area for the activity this week. So HR seems to work with these characteristics that are intrinsic to human beings. They think about what are the various tasks and challenges of people's lives. So HR's job is to have the knowledge, the skills, and the energies that we use in our daily roles. And we can draw on Marx here, who calls it our labor power or capacity for labor. HR are the people who determine what a good balance is, what the human output could be, what would be an interesting role, what are the characteristics that make a particular job. So when you get a job description, when you're applying for a job, it is HR who determines what that role is going to be, what goes or complements the suite of responsibilities for any particular job. It is HR who build that package together. Because why would they need to do that? They would need to do that because they see this particular role as fulfilling a need in society or in the industry for bigger goals to be achieved. So the general functions of HR are to job design, which is exactly what I was talking about. How do they job design what your roles would have to be and your responsibilities? But they go beyond that as well, because they're also for the daily fairness and equity management. So even within their job design, but also in the management of people, their people management needs to be always considerate of fairness and equity. Compensation. How are you motivated, but how are you also rewarded for the job that you do? And your well-being. Believe it or not, HR is also responsible to make sure that your well-being is looked after. So your health as well. So if you need an ergonomic chair or a desk or a mouse pad, or you're left-handed, or you have any sort of physical disabilities. HR is there to look after your physical well-being, but also in some capacity make sure that you are mentally functionable and you are in a mentally good space as well. So that ties up the four main areas of HR's responsibility: well-being, consistency, compliance, and progression. So if we were to break these down, you'll see that starting with well-being, it's the physical and emotional health, our intellectual capabilities, and our personalities, that's a typo there, and our motivations. So we can't really function in a job if we have some physical or emotional stress that is becoming too difficult to deal with, that we can't do our tasks. So handling things like how much grievance time we're given when there's a bereavement in the family, or managing team building days. HR does look after the emotional well-being of their employees. It includes levels of stress. So you may hear of people or know of people who've taken stress leave at work, their mental health, their job satisfaction. Often in your appraisals, you will be asked, how are things going for you? Are you satisfied? Are you happy? Do you feel safe working in this place? Do you feel that you have equal opportunity and you're not being discriminated? Do you feel sexually harassed? Or do you feel there's not enough consideration for disability access in our building or in the structure or even in the roles that we have? So HR's suite of skill set of managing people covers all of these areas. Suddenly you start to realize, wait a minute, wow, okay, aside from my manager, HR is quite a level of a place that I go to for the accountability of many things in the workplace. They also look after the consistency. And what do we mean by consistency? Which is to manage equal workloads for employees and check that tasks are being completed in anticipated timelines so that there's no favoritism. Everyone at a certain pay grade is given a consistent, equal kind of, as best as it can be, share of work to do. And they're looking for your ability to, they try to manage your ability to comply with things on time. Well, not comply, but to be consistent with completing your roles, your tasks. So they do regular appraisals and they make sure you're performing at pace and that you deliver results and you manage your time and you manage your absenteeism. So HR is also there to check for your sick days, your leave days, your annual leave days. They make sure that the allocated days and responsibilities are consistent with your role. Employee progression. So they need to give you opportunities for your growth and your stability so that you can feel a sense of commitment to the job. You want to stay working in this particular place because you can see somewhere along the road another position that you will like to have. So you have space to plot your next strategic move in the workplace. And it's their job to illuminate what those particular pathways may look like. So stabilizing the hierarchy of the job progression, managing the time job appraisals, matching your responsibilities, making sure your job title is something that matches what you do, promotions, listening to how you want to go for a promotion, and putting review panels in place. So in terms of progression, they're also sort of plotting those goals for you in the future, making them very shiny and attractive, things that you want to work towards, things that seem for someone in your particular role that you can see clearly. So any job that you get, you must look at how can you grow in this particular role, especially as a younger person or starting off on a fresh job or a new career change or new pathway. What is the particular job? In your particular job, can you see the next 3 or 4 steps forward? And if you can't, then you maybe need to talk to someone in HR, talk to your line manager, and find out how can I build into this job. So you always have a goal that you're working towards. And of course, for compliance. So they are there to make sure that you adhere to the particular regulations and protocols. So if you start a new job, you will go through some induction or some training, and you'll also have a probation period. So the compliance comes in there. You need to know the fire hazard training, you need to know the well-being training, the safety training. You need to comply, you need to complete the task and be briefed on what are the necessary steps that you need to take. HR is responsible for all of that. And interestingly, they are also responsible to make sure that their employees are not committing crimes or doing money laundering, managing that employees do not disrupt the work environment or are unprofessional with each other. So if you have a bit of a run-in with another employee, normally it is HR who is responsible for mitigating the situation and managing the happiness of and well-being of everyone involved. And HR is the one who helps manage and promotes the image of the company as stable and trustworthy. So you can see now that HR has several different roles. And I don't know, maybe you can comment about it. Did you know that HR is so comprehensive in what they do? So if we were to just step out of that for a moment and think about at schools, students don't really have an HR per se, but can you think about what are the parallels for students? Who looks after student well-being? Who looks after the consistency of student, the progression that they need to make, the compliance, that they listen and follow the rules? Who are the gatekeepers for those responsibilities in a school? Are they the teacher? Are they the head teacher? Is some of it the student? Is it the principal? So have a think about that. Can you make a comment on that? Are they all being looked after by the same person or different people? So we say that school is a micro society preparing young people for the workplace. Is this true or false? Well, the answer is that it is true. School is a micro society. You have even school politics and school negotiation of friendships, and even within the students themselves, they have their micro politics that happen in the classroom and dynamic groups and friendship groups. You have the teachers, you have the structure, the organization. It is a micro society. Does it prepare young people for the workplace though? Well, that's another thing to consider. Is what we learn preparation, or is part of the whole process of being in the school and operating within the constraints of the school preparation for the workplace? So think about that as well. And are we adequately training students for the workplace? This is another good question. So when we think of training, and as we would have spoken about in last week's lecture with the two teacher roles, so they have the agents of the curriculum and agents of the school. So when we think of training, are we talking about just what we teach students, or are schools modeling workplace behavior? Do we do enough problem solving and relationship building skills? Are we giving students enough autonomy to be able to make decisions and take leadership positions, to know how to do things that are non-prescriptive? One thing that we have noticed coming through the ages is the level of prescriptive activity that students depend on when they leave A levels, looking for the permission-seeking generation, needing the permission. Am I right? Am I okay? Am I doing the right thing? This has become more dominant and prominent in our education and our education environments. So it is interesting to think, are we in this prescriptive way damaging people's ability to problem solve and think more creatively? And is the school really doing that in the workplace? Because in the workplace, you can't write one paragraph and then go to your line manager and be like, is this right? You can seek guidance, but at some point you will have to come up with creative problem solving skills yourself. Much like in the example we have right now with the coronavirus, and all of the academics suddenly having to take what we are our regular practice and become much more creative about how we're going to problem solve and put dynamic solutions in place to help cope with the current dilemma that we are in. So the workplace, at some point, your employers, sorry, are not going to have the answers for you. At some point, you would have been hired for that job because you have to come up with the answers yourself. Are we adequately training students for the workplace? So have a think about that, and it would be great to hear some comments on it in the Moodle activity section. And this is a really interesting one. So we've spoken about the student and the school. Think about the university now. Is it adequately training you with skills for the workplace? So the temptation may be great to always say, see, the university could be doing more, but you need to think about it very carefully in terms of what we teach you. Do you rely on just the knowledge itself for the workplace? Are there certain jobs where you will need the knowledge, particularly what you learn? Or are the other skill sets as well, like managing your own time, coping with things like 9 a.m. lectures, or coping with distance learning, family issues, mental health, coping with the challenges that you have day to day, coping with the coronavirus challenge that we have right now? Are you demonstrating, have you gained, are you working on skills within the university that help you provide scenarios which help you negotiate and build those skill sets? So you need to think about that as well as part of your entire experience. And I'd love to hear some of this from you. And when you do say your answer, maybe say what you think more of would help you prepare for the workplace. Is university the best place to give you that kind of preparation? So compensation. Who determines how we get paid? Often when you look at job descriptions being advertised, you might be tempted to go with the role that offers the most money. But compensation is more than just money, is it not? But who determines how we get paid and how much we get paid? So money is the most desired work compensation. Is that true or false? And I would say in most cases, at least 7 times out of 10, it is true. When we look for job descriptions, we're happy to adjust what we're unhappy with if the price is right, more times than others. So money is a powerful motivator. However, it's not the only motivator. Many of you who want to go into teaching understand that there's not, a great salary payoff sometimes in the teaching profession. That is a very well established fact, actually. But people do it and become teachers for more altruistic reasons, to give back to society, to help others, those humanitarian reasons. And in those examples, money is not necessarily the key motivating figure. You feel more compensated than attracted to money as being the reason you do the job. So money increasingly acquires value as a result of its perceived instrumentality to access other desired results. So you may be taking a particular job for money because you see it as an opportunity to grow. You see it as a reflection. How much you earn is how important you are in your particular workplace. So money is representative of setting up your sense of entitlement or positionality. But the meaning of money depends on the individual. Money itself is an objective means to obtaining goods and fulfilling needs and desires. But it is not the be all and end all. It does have influence, but again, it is compensation for your time. So your money is supposed to be representative of the value of the work that you put in and the risk that you take on with your job. So you get compensated to take on these risks as you go ahead and have to manage the workload and the responsibilities of the particular role that you hold. But there are other forms of compensation as well, pensions being one of those, accumulated over service. So you may take a job um, because it secures your pension. It enables you to save as you go. Stocks. Some companies that you work in will give you stocks in the company, and this is a form of compensation as well. Some banks enable you to buy stocks and shares. The share scheme, your part ownership, you make an investment without upfront costs. So they tell you, hey, you're going to join my company and I'm going to give you X number of shares. You don't have to pay me for them now, but they will come and become yours in 5 years' time after you work for the duration of that time for me. So if you so choose to leave, you would get those shares if you wanted to leave. That's also a form of compensation, a bit of promise and investment in something. A flex credit plan is offering employees benefits. So for example, they will pay a large proportion off of a car or vehicle benefit for you. So you get that sort of compensation as well. You get a brand new fancy car to drive, but work is essentially covering some of those costs, and some of the premium is held by the company. So they let you buy the car at a much reduced rate because they cover some of it. And a bonus. So we all know about bonuses. Being able to get a bonus, which is a lump sum of money that's added to a person's wage as a reward for good performance. So this is seen more in the business sector and the banking sector particularly. Each year people get a bonus, and it's almost a percentage of the money that they bring into the company. This is also an incentive for you to work throughout the year because it may be measured up against what it is that you brought in, or it may be a reflective amount of money that the company holistically gained in terms of profits, and then it's shared up amongst its employees. So these other forms of compensation compete with that of money alone. You're able to see how these are other rewards that motivate you to be in a particular workplace and that compensate you. It's not just cash being deposited into your bank account. So what does disengagement in the workplace look like? So despite the efforts of HR to do all of their roles, sometimes they fail and you become disengaged in your workplace. What does that? So this is an interesting question. Do people fail at work for the same reasons they fail at school? Do they? And the answer to that, now suddenly, this is where you take a deep breath and you think about it. People fail at work for the same reasons as students would fail in school. Think about yourself. Right now, you are working, but you're also kind of in school, you're at university. There may be certain tasks that you want to overcome because you're not enjoying something in the moment. And you think that as time goes by, you won't have to deal with this particular thing. Take, for example, group work. You're like, okay, I hate doing group presentations. I'm going to do this group presentation because at the end of it, I don't necessarily have to deal with that again. The reality is that when you go into the workplace, there are going to be opportunities where you may have to deal with group presentations again. So if you try to avoid approaching certain tasks and sweep things under the carpet without coming up with a better plan for how to deal with things that may be difficult or you don't understand or they bring you some discomfort, you are going to come up against these things again in the workplace. And if you consistently keep coming up against it and it causes you failure to perform or to succeed, then you can see how this is going to transpose itself into the work environment for you and create problems again. So university is an interesting space because it gives you enough autonomy to problem solve and work on these skills as you go, and develop a plan for how you would deal with things as a professional. So you definitely want to be taking the time to think about your awareness of your learning, your awareness of what causes you difficulty, and how are you going to approach the problem solving for that. It does not mean forcing yourself through it, but it does mean thinking creatively about what is challenging you and how can you come up with a plan to counteract that. So you could be underprepared from an early age and not suitable for the role. That is absolutely fine. I could make you all CEOs of companies and you may fail at that particular job because you just don't have the accumulated experience yet to be able to do that particular role. So you need to build up to it, and you're not going to um, master the task or the difficult task every time you try. Or when you try it once, you may have to try and, like grit, try and try again and try again, dealing with something difficult until you find something that works for you in a particular scenario, and be ready to adapt that. Also, you may fail at something because the demands of your family or your community or your friends or your life external to work makes it difficult for you to get that balance right. And this happens um, and manifests itself many times in people's lives. So then we come back to burnout, which is the exhaustion or the mental distancing and the lack of professional efficacy. You can leave your job because you feel this type of burnout. And while it can apply to a range of people in different professions, it's not just limited to professionals who work with other people. So people can feel burnout across the board in different jobs. You can't say that because you're in an office space, you will feel burnout, or because you have a desk job, you will get burnt out. No, actually, people feel burnout in very different ways in different professions as well. So HR's job is to support the well-being programs, to provide programs and ensure that employees take their leave. There are lots of people who work and don't take their leave. They have to remember to take their work leave, take their holiday, do their work appraisals, constantly check in and see how are they going. Are you okay? How are you feeling? Is the work too much? What are you struggling with? So this is what HR needs to put into place to try and check for burnout. And that's what appraisals are about, making sure and checking how you are progressing in the job. So boredom is another one that people will leave the workplace. This is when they become dissatisfied, and this is linked to the lack of challenge, or if they're repeating a task over and over and over again, they get bored. They know exactly what their day is going to look like from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day for every hour. They become bored. So HR's job is to assess boredom by looking at how quickly they complete a job, listening to complaints of employees, looking for employees who are distracted, the people who go to the coffee machine and stand for 10 hours and don't want to come back to their desk, assessing their focus and obtaining their feedback. So it's really important that HR try and understand if you are feeling bored in your role, what can they do to give you a little bit more responsibility or change up the range of tasks that you have to do. But people do leave because of boredom for those reasons. So work engagement is all about vigor, dedication, and absorption. Work engagement is much like that character on the PowerPoint there. You feel constantly, you're busy, but you're good busy. Like you have multiple things to do, but you're enjoying how you spend your time, and you look down at your clock and you realize, oh my gosh, it's 6 o'clock, I have to go home. It's 6 p.m. and I've been working all day and I've got so many things done and I've got so many more things to do, but I don't necessarily feel tired, or I don't necessarily feel bored or burnt out. I don't feel the weight of the work too much on my shoulders. This is when you know you are engaged in your workplace. You look forward to coming in the next morning, to picking up where you left off and seeing something completed or getting something started. You see the progression happening. So engagement is inversely related to burnout and boredom. Obviously, it is like engagement is the string that pulls away from burnout and boredom. So realistically, we are not constantly engaged in our job or our profession. There is no way that you will go to work and you will enjoy every single thing about your job. But there is a balance to be struck, is where you enjoy more things than the things that you don't enjoy. So a lot of academics may tell you, we enjoy interacting with students, we enjoy seeing their growth and their development. That's the teacher sort of self-determination theory happening there. We enjoy the material that we work with, the knowledge that is discussed, the autonomy of the job space, but we don't enjoy the marking. Very rarely do I meet academics or teachers who enjoy the marking. So that might be a component of the job that we don't enjoy, but the everything else, the research and the teaching and the novelty of the information and the theory, these things that we do enjoy far outweigh the things that we don't. And that's what you're looking for in your workspace. You take the things that you don't like and you look at them as cons compared to the pros of the things that you do like, and then you'll be able to understand, are you having work engagement or not? So you are, for your assessment, meant to come up with some examples as professionals, much like we did for the education, and some of them we even covered if you are struggling to look at what teachers may have to do as professionals to keep their students or to develop or to work on as teachers. Today we looked at boredom and burnout, and if you were to think of being a professional, can you come up with examples where people might need to develop their work skills to avoid burnout or boredom? And then you take those particular examples as being a professional and use the theories that we've discussed in the module to present how you would think about this or how you would see this manifesting. So it's exactly the same that you need to do for your aspirational portfolio, except here you're using a professional example, and that could be anything professionally that people will need to work on. So using the activity section in Moodle, you can share your responses to the questions asked in the lecture, and we can get a group discussion going. So it would be really good to hear back from you about what you've picked up in this session, and realistically, we only have a couple more sessions after this. And these other sessions are more about bringing things together. So in terms of content-wise, we're pretty much covered everything that you need to do and know to do all of your assessment for the module. You are prepared now, rest assured. And the rest of the lectures are going to be just putting those things together for you, or helping you think through some things to put it together. Next week's lecture, this is really important. So lecture 8 was for the March the 24th, was supposed to be on obtaining your DBS. The DBS is the clearance that you need to be able to work with vulnerable young children in schools. This lecture has been postponed, unfortunately, because the team that does the DBS training needs to do this lecture hands-on and see documents and whatnot to help you apply for it. Now, you will need to apply for your DBS and have this approved for year 2 when you do the part 2 of this module for your placement. So you each have to go out and do some work placement in a particular school, and you will need that DBS in place in order to do this. Some of you may have your DBS already, that's fine. Some of you will need to get it, and we are aware of this, so you need to watch the space because we're going to schedule in that session for you at some point in the future when things have settled again, or when we have a clear idea about what's going on with our current coronavirus situation. So just watch the space and we will be in touch about it. So next week there will not be a lecture for this module. However, I will put up some activities or some guidance on what you should be working on, which will be your group presentations. I am working on how to provide support for you to do those group presentations, but do it remotely and together online so that you can build together your presentation and submit it. It means you won't be presenting for us in the flesh, face to face, but you will be putting that together and submitting it as a group. So you still do need to get in touch with your group members via email, via WhatsApp, via Moodle, and please keep checking your email. So that's it for today. Please go onto the Moodle site now and respond to those activities. Looking forward to hearing from you. Take care.